Welcome to DIYeasycrafts and BergKnifemaking.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to make a duck hunting theme knife. Now this particular knife is a AEBL stainless steel. It's one of my standard knife blanks. I made some custom cast handles. I cast marsh reeds into that clear resin, and then I also etched the blade with an angry duck design. The end product is going to be a field dressing knife for duck hunting. So I started the process on a tilt table, which is a bevel grinding jig designed for 2x72 grinders. I ground bevels. Even though I'm going to do a full flat grind on this, I like to start with regular flat bevels because I can hold a really consistent line on that on the railroad tracks that are scribed on the blade's edge. Then I go back to the 2x72 with a 90-degree table, and I'm using a push stick so my fingers don't get burned, and I'm just going to start to remove the material for the flat grind, for the full flat grind. Then, in order to get rid of the horizontal grind lines, I increase the grit on the belt, and I start to grind vertically. The whole process doesn't take all that much time. And once I've got the knife roughed, or the rough grinding done, it's time for heat treating. So because it's stainless, I'm going to wrap it in a stainless tool wrap, double fold each one of the edges, and then this goes into, in this case, an even heat oven, 1960 degrees. For a 15-minute hold time. I actually let it build up to the 1960. I usually put it in around 15 or 1600. Let it get up to the 1960, and then it's got to stay there for 15 minutes. After it's been in there, the 15, I take it out, and stainless or AEBL is air quenched. So what I do is I clamp it in between two pieces of aluminum tubing. That keeps that blade nice and straight, nice and flat. And then I use compressed air and I blow it in between each one of the tubes and then also through each tube. And you really want to cool it as quickly as possible. Once it's cool enough, it only takes a few minutes to cool down, I can take it out and cut it out of that tool wrap. Now after heat treating, these blades are going to go into sub-zero quench. I'm just using a block of dry ice. There's no particular hold time for this. I leave it there for a half hour or so, and then it's tempered in a regular oven, two tempering cycles, 2 hours each, 395 degrees. For the blade etching, I cut out the design on my craft vinyl cutting machine called a Silhouette Cameo. I then attached that vinyl to the blade and I weeded out all the material, exposing any areas that I wanted to get etched. I use a car battery charger, 12 volts, 2 amps. I use gauze wrapped around an etching plate. Got the positive attached to the blade, negative attached to that etching plate, and the gauze is saturated in an electrolyte solution of white wine vinegar and salt. I etched it for a total of about 3 minutes. This is the first layer of the etching. For about 3 minutes. Then I can remove the vinyl. In this case, I'm using a little razor knife to help me remove that vinyl. And then I can just sand it off with an emery paper. That'll give you the first idea as to what the blade etching, the final product, is going to end up looking like. Now the scales for this, I mentioned before, I cast these using a Total Boat thick-set resin. It's a really cool resin to work with. It's very thin. It takes a little while to cure. It takes 4 or 5 days to completely cure. But it allows you to cast things like this without using a pressure pot. And so it allows plenty of time for the bubbles to reach the surface, and you end up with a nice casting without any bubbles. So I glued 1/2 onto the blade. And then I put this on a drill press with a backing board and a clamp so that blade can't spin on me. And I use the holes that are pre-drilled through the blank as my drill guide. I drill through that first half of the handles or the scales. Then what I'll do is I'll glue up the second side of the handles, get that front or that top edge to line up perfectly with the first side, clamp it, let it dry, and then once that's dry, I'll go back to the drill press. Again, I've got that backing board and the clamp in position, and I'll use the pre-existing holes through side number 1 as my drill guide. So in this step, that drill bit is going through all 3 pieces, both sides of the handles as well as the tang of the blade. I used a bandsaw just to cut off some excess material from the handles, and then I'll go back to the 2x72 with a coarse grit belt just to finish profiling those scales. I like to round over the top edge of the handles right on the 2x72. I try to do as much as possible on the 2x72. You got to be real careful here. You don't want to touch the blade with that belt at all. You can ruin it in a heartbeat. I also use the bottom 2-inch wheel just to hog out some of the material from the inside curves of the blade of the handle. This Total Boat resin is really nice to work with. It's very easy to polish. I use an oscillating sander, and I usually sand it at 400, 600, 1000. I hand sand in between, and then I will use a 1500 or a 2000 just to finish it off, and then I'll buff it on the buffing wheel. Once the handles are buffed, I go back and I put a micro bevel on the blade. I do this with a 120 grit belt, holding it at about 20 degrees, and I'll create a bevel, a burr along the entire length of the blade. Once I have that burr, I'll then switch belts and slow down the belt. So, I started at a 120. I'll also do something in the 400, the 800, 1000, and then 2000 range. And then the final step is just going to be to use a leather stroping belt. For this, I don't turn the belt sander on. I really just use it to hold that belt in place. And that, very quickly, gives you literally a razor sharp blade. So this was just a real fast overview of the entire knife building process for this duck hunting themed knife. Again, it's AEBL stainless steel. It's got custom handles that are cast from marsh grass or marsh reeds. And it's got an angry duck design etched onto the blade. I hope you liked the video. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'd absolutely love it if you left a comment in the comments section. I'd like to give you an invite to join us on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making. And if you're interested in making your own knives, check out the book that Jason Northgard and I put out a couple of years ago called Introduction to Knife Making, and you can find that on Amazon.com. Thank you very much.